The rich end times typology in the story of Lot and the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah is amazing, and that's what we're talking about today. Long before Paul described the church being caught up to meet the Lord in the air, and even longer before John was summoned through a door in heaven, there was a man living in the ancient city of Sodom. His name was Lot. And what happened to him provides a typological shadow of things to come. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the rapture and the end times. And this story is a fascinating example of how I believe God will act when he brings judgment onto the world. If you're not familiar, Sodom was a city deeply marked by sin. Its corruption had become so widespread that the outcry against it reached heaven. According to Genesis 18, God determined to bring judgment, but not without first rescuing the one who belonged to him, Lot, whose story reveals a pattern that only becomes clear as the narrative progresses. So Lot's life started alongside Abraham. He walked with him, witnessed God's faithfulness, and had been blessed because of his connection to the covenant family. But when both Abraham and Lot's possessions became too great to share the land, Lot chose to move toward the Jordan Valley. Genesis 13 says he pitched his tents near Sodom. Now eventually he moved into the city, and by Genesis 14, Lot is living in Sodom, a city corrupted by sin. And then finally by Genesis 19, he is seated at the gate, a sign of civic status. He was fully embedded in the culture. This says a lot about his downward path. Now, prominent Bible teacher Dr. Andy Woods describes Lot's decline as a gradual shift, not a dramatic fall. Lot didn't renounce his faith, but he slowly allowed comfort and proximity to shape his decisions. But his heart was still troubled by the sin around him. Peter says in 2 Peter 2:7 and 8 that Lot was oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men, and that his soul was tormented day after day. But even with that grief, Lot had grown comfortable enough to stay. Now this grief he was feeling, it was far from being just natural irritation, and it was more spiritual in nature. The Greek word for tormented here implies deep, ongoing inner distress. For a believer, this is consistent with the conviction that comes from the indwelling Holy Spirit. Now, although the text does not mention the Spirit explicitly, Lot's experience reflects the inner witness of a renewed heart, a soul made righteous by faith, grieved by unrepentant sin. This is why Peter calls Lot righteous. In 2 Peter 2:7 and 8, Peter refers to Lot as righteous 3 times. I mean, he was definitely far from a picture-perfect follower of God, but he was considered righteous, not because of perfect choices, but because of his position. It was based on his standing. He was declared righteous by faith, and God honored that even when his discernment was weak. At this point, the narrative shifts from Lot's spiritual condition to the timing and structure of the rescue itself. When the angels arrived in Sodom, they warned Lot that judgment was coming. God was about to act. But they also said something important. Quote, "Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there." You see that? The angels didn't say they wouldn't bring judgment until Lot was safe. They said they couldn't. That distinction matters. The destruction was divinely restrained until Lot, the righteous man, was removed from danger. The angels were under explicit divine command not to act until the believer was gone. So Lot requested to flee to a nearby town called Zoar, and once he arrived, the destruction began. This detail matters. It reveals something about the way God works. He does not unleash judgment while the righteous are still present. Paul writes in 1 Thessalonians 1:10 that Jesus, quote, delivers us from the wrath to come, and in 1 Thessalonians 5:9 that God has not destined us for wrath. Lot's rescue fits the same order: first removal, then judgment. Now, Jesus confirms this pattern in Luke 17, where he says, "On the day that Lot went out from Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. It will be just the same on the day the Son of Man is revealed." So you see, judgment came only after Lot's removal, a sequence that Jesus affirms remains unchanged even into the last days. He then issues a sobering warning. He says, "Remember Lot's wife." Just 3 words, yet they carry so much weight. He's saying, don't look back, don't cling to this world. Remember Lot's wife. Why? Well, then he goes on to say, whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. Lot's wife physically walked out of the city, but her heart stayed behind. When she turned to look, she turned to a pillar of salt. This wasn't about incomplete obedience. It revealed her divided loyalty. She did not believe that what God was leading her into was better than what he was judging behind her. Her story stands as a reminder that faith and unbelief are often revealed not just in our actions, but also in our affections. The Bible is clear that we are saved by grace through faith, not of works. But genuine faith follows God when he calls and doesn't look back. Now in Genesis 19:23, we read, "The sun had risen over the earth when Lot entered Zoar." This moment when Lot is finally safe from judgment carries deep theological significance. The rising sun marks not only the completion of Lot's rescue, but symbolically, I believe it also signals the beginning of a new era, a resurrection to new life. Just as the sunrise marks the start of a new day, Lot's deliverance represents the dawn of a new chapter, one of salvation and transformation. And finally, there's also something amazing in the language of Genesis 19:24. It says, "Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven." Did you catch that? The name Yahweh appears twice in the same sentence, first referring to the Lord who initiates the judgment, and then again as the one in heaven from whom the judgment comes. This dual reference has led many to see a hint of distinction within the Godhead, possibly alluding to a theophany or a physical appearance of God on earth, acting in unity with Yahweh in heaven. While not a full revelation of the Trinity, it foreshadows a kind of intra-divine interaction that becomes clearer in the New Testament. So this verse subtly anticipates the New Testament revelation of the Trinity. The Lord, or Yahweh, is mentioned twice, once as present on earth and once as acting from heaven. This does not imply two gods, but reveals the unity and distinction within the Godhead. In Christian theology, this foreshadows the relationship between the Father and the Son, one divine essence, yet distinct persons. Jesus, who is fully God, would later say, "I and the Father are one," affirming that the one who judges and the one who saves are the same Lord. Now, this judgment on Sodom may be difficult for some to reconcile with God's goodness, but we must understand that just as Abraham pleaded for the city and God agreed to spare it if even 10 righteous people were found, God's mercy always precedes his judgment. His desire is always to extend mercy where possible. However, when no righteous individuals could be found except for Lot and his family, judgment became inevitable. So this pattern of deliverance of wrath not only mirrors the rapture of the church, but points directly to the gospel. Just as Lot was saved from destruction because of his righteousness, believers are delivered from God's wrath, not because of their own righteousness, but because of the righteousness of Christ credited to them through faith. My friends, we are living at a time that closely mirrors the days of Sodom. Society is marked by moral decay where pride, self-sufficiency, and neglect of the poor dominate. The widespread acceptance of immorality, the erosion of biblical values, and the increasing violence and hatred in our world echo the sins of Sodom. People continue to live as though judgment is far off, and they have no regard for the divine reality of judgment. Much like the residents of Sodom, many today are living in spiritual blindness, unaware of the impending judgment that is coming swiftly. This is a time to remember the lessons of Sodom and prepare our hearts for the coming of the Lord. Well, that's going to do it for today. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and let me know what I missed. I mean, I know there's so much more. The Bible is filled with revelations waiting to be found, waiting to be uncovered when we get deep in the Word. So, in the meantime, take care and God bless.